We're live. Okay, so here's the question: persistence versus annoyance. When does one become the other? All right, Ryan, here we are, Monday morning. My hands are crossed. I still have not
Thank
figured out
God.
that little thing in my computer that's doing all the little signs behind me. But anyways, persistence versus annoyance. I think this is a topic that I know for myself, I'm constantly not necessarily struggling with, but asking myself. Like I used to do every 24 hours, I would retouch with a person until I got a hold of them. And then I remember being told by a traffic manager saying, "You know what? Like you're friggin' annoying. Stop trying to get a hold of me. I would have been interested in it, but you're a little too over the top with the amount you connect." And then you hear, people like Grant Cardone saying, "No, no, 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 no. Like you just keep going, keep going, keep going. More messages, more messages, more messages." And so I thought about this on the weekend, and I said, at what point are we persistent? Because I do believe your next customer enjoys your persistence, because if you're hopefully you'll maintain that persistence throughout the relationship, and hopefully if there's issues you'll be persistent about solving them. I believe persistence is a key to being successful in the value industry. So anything that you're trying to provide value for, right? That consistency, that persistence is key. But at what point does it become annoying? And what have you seen in your sales career where you're like, hey, am I on that border of annoyance, or am I still in that area of persistence?
So it's not going to be a good topic for me, Dan. The only reason why I say that is that I've never really looked at this or thought about this
Mm,
because I simply don't care as a sales rep. So I can go back to say that I've never had a customer or prospect say that I'm too annoying, like take me out. Like I've never had that interaction. My mindset when let's break it down into touches and the prospecting touches. If we're doing prospecting, then we'll get to after getting the customer and things like that. For prospecting, I think I go every 48 hours is kind of like my rule of thumb.
hmm
However, though, if I'm not gatekeeping here, but if there's certain triggers, like they open an email or open a video, then I'll make sure to like capitalize on that, like give them a phone call right away from there. So I've never looked at it persistent. I've always looked at it like this is my job. Any guy, like let me give you a great example here. The TELUS security guys here in Toronto, they come to our house like every week, but they don't know that like something's getting crossed because we live in a new development. The wires are getting crossed, so they're literally coming here every week, and it's a new rep. And every time I tell them, they're like, "Are you serious?" Like and it's not done by purpose because the Rogers and Bells guys. So these guys are they're just doing their job at the end of the day. And I think for myself, like messaging, so that's the prospecting side. When I get to once we've done the SOP and we got you as a customer, I love to over communicate. Even if it's like a tracking update, or if it's like, hey, can you tell us the hours of this? I always tell my team, like, guys, don't assume anything. If it's not in our SOP, ask the question. And the worst thing you want to do is assume, oh yeah, 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 I thought it was 8 to 4, and then guy shows up at there at 3 o'clock, and they're actually 8 to 1 by appointment
hmm
only, or something like that, right? And you just kind of whatever you can control. So coming back from like a sales part of it, I've never looked at it as persistence versus annoyance. I just feel like I'm literally doing my job. This is what it is. And if somebody does have a problem with it, they would tell me. The worst thing that can happen is that they don't reply to the email, right? And I don't consider that. It's just a not yet. It's just they're not ignoring me at that point. It's just I haven't provided enough value to that point. But I've read, so maybe I can talk a little bit about that. But I've read like certain companies, like they're hitting them up like 3 times a day, and teach their own. You might be, you might strike out, right? So it is what it is from that. But like I said, I'm not going to be really give too much value on this thing because I've never really thought about this, or has it ever played a factor in my sales career?
Well, that's actually adding value, Ryan. Um, the reason I set this for today is because last week I had a meeting with big client of mine and longtime friend, and we were talking, and he mentioned two companies that are calling him every day And he goes, and Dan, I don't understand how they're not getting the point. He
Has he
goes,
said anything though? Like I
yeah,
think
he
that's
said
okay.
he
So
said
he's
something like 5 times to each of them. He goes, it's to the point where I don't even answer the phone anymore. And he goes, and I don't know if it's a numbers game. Like he started asking, like what's happening in the industry? Like I have so many people reaching out to me every day, and I keep telling them, like, listen, freight is slowed down. I have suppliers in place. I'm trying to keep my present suppliers happy with volumes. And I think we hear that a lot in today's day and age. Like
mm-hmm,
suppliers that have been with this company for a while. I could tell you, for example, our Indiana location, there's 4 of us in there. Okay. And some weeks we get 15, 20 loads. Some weeks we get 6 or 7. Some weeks we get 2. Some weeks we get none. And when we talk to the shipper, they say, listen, like we're running short on material. We're just trying to keep everybody happy. And we're like, okay, we understand that. So this individual is getting calls every day from 2 companies in particular. And he's like, Dan, I just don't get it. Like, and tell me, share with me, like salespeople, do you just not listen when we speak? Or do you think I'm bullshitting you? And I said, well, they probably think you're bullshitting because we see equipment leaving this facility all the time. And he says, you see, the difference is those are local deliveries. I said, but did you explain that? He goes, yeah, all the time. And this is locked down under contract for the next 10 years. Like nobody's getting the business. Like, there's no way in other words.
mm-hmm,
And I found it very interesting because I said, well, at what point did it go from persistence to annoyance? And he said, probably after I had to tell them the second time. He goes like, if I tell you I'm, now's not the right time, for example. And I said, yeah. And he goes, and then you call me back a day later. What do you think's changed in a day? And I said, okay, but can't a lot change in a day? He goes, not that much. And I said, okay. And he says, a month later, for sure. Even 3 weeks later, for sure. But when you're calling me every day and I'm telling you the same thing, he says, it just gets to a point where um, I'm not even interested. And he goes, and here's the thing, Dad, even if I had business, I would not give it to them now.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
thought that, Ryan, I was like, this is interesting. Okay. So the fact that you don't think of that, I think is amazing. I believe in the 48-hour rule. Sometimes I'm kind of mixing it up where I go 2 days or 3 days, depending on which step in my manual sequence I'm doing. But I've always, for gosh, a decade and a half now, I've lived under the 48-hour rule, like belief that every 2 days, if they're not answering, like once we have a conversation, they say, hey, let's connect in a week. I don't connect every 2 days after that, obviously, right? But it's and then I'll talk to another traffic manager who maybe I don't do business with, and I say, like, what are kind of the pet peeves? I said, I'm calling every 2 days. He goes, no, way too much. I said, really? I said, what if you're not responding? He says, no, still way too much. So it's interesting because everybody's going to have a different view of it. Now, the 4 people I spoke to about this topic are multi-million-dollar shippers, like 30-40 million dollars a year in shipping, right?
mm-hmm,
Annual shipping fees. So I thought for sure those are the guys that are going to get the most calls and probably the most frequent calls because it's a big business book of business when you land it, right? So it's interesting because some of them are, yeah, call me every 2 days. If I don't answer, just keep following up. You'll be the first one in my mind. And other ones are like, this is just annoying as hell. So I thought it was an interesting conversation. I'd love to hear from the audience what you guys and gals think about, um, that difference between persistence and annoyance. And I guess, Ryan, I, you know, obviously as humans, we all think back to, well, if it was me, I would, right? You've heard that
yeah,
a lot of the
yeah,
times when my wife in particular, she's a very empathetic person, right?
mm-hmm,
And when something happens, she'll say, but if it was me, I would do this. And I say, honey, I know that because that's who you are. But other people are not like that. So at what point um, do we as salespeople become annoying? And what do we say about it? Where you said, hey, Dan, you know what? If I become annoying, somebody's going to tell me. And I've had that conversation with many logistics managers, traffic managers, planners, and everything. And they're like, you know what, Dan, a little much. Like, and I'm like, okay, no problem. Just understand one thing. Like outbound sales is how every company grows. Your salespeople are doing exactly what I'm doing. So I apologize. I'm just doing my job. And that's when they kind of stop and they go, you know what? Yes. Cause I'm like referencing it back to something they're aware of, right? They know they have a sales team at the company. Their sales team is outbound calling. Maybe their sales team is fighting with the persistence versus annoyance thought in their head. Um, in speaking with a couple of salespeople last week in preparation for today, I also asked them, like, in your head, what makes you push sales leads out? And the answer was interesting because they look at it and they say, well, I spoke to this person 2 days ago or 3 days ago. I don't want to be annoying, and they push it out. And when I started inquiring as to why, it became an issue with procrastination, not necessarily worry about where what that person would think of the follow up. So I was
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, this is a really interesting topic. And I think it's a topic where everyone's going to have a different opinion. Like when I say that to you, what do you think of?
Yeah, it's great that you say that because I think it just brings me back to the point that it's just different messaging for different people,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be even if it's in the same niche. It's just it comes down to people, right? It comes down to what they want to do, and what their own experiences and what their life journey has been like from then. Because like there's gonna be people that you follow up with all the time, and they're just gonna negate you to like a duck cleaning person or like an oil salesman or something like that. Sorry, a car salesman or something like that. But you
Snake
know,
oil salesman.
yeah, snake oil
Yes.
salesman. There we go,
Yeah.
one of those famous ones.
Yeah.
But I think for myself, and I think Nerf brings up a great thing here, where you just kind of put it on the line for myself. And for me, you kind of come in as human, right? I'm not robotic. And, that's where you got to be on the same page with the company that you work with, right? Because I feel like the bigger brokerages and bigger like asset plays with a bigger sales team, leads they fall through the cracks, right?
Yes.
So like, a lot of guys, they come in for like 60, 90 days, they hustle, they get fired, and then another person comes in, they do that call. Like, Dan, I've picked up the pieces on so many calls where, the person got fired and I was tossed that lead and just say, hey, I just want to introduce myself and be like, oh, I actually got this moving today. And then you start to realize, like, why did this not move? It wasn't me. It wasn't the person before. Like, there has to be some variable about there. So maybe they weren't just persistent enough, to be completely honest, from their end, and
Mm.
they're saying that they are.
And they might be sitting there thinking I'm being annoying, but they're not persistent enough for that individual.
Yeah, you got to get out of that mindset too.
Mm.
I think for everybody who's watching out there, I think Hermosi talks about it. At the end of the day, man, we all have goals and objectives that we want to do. I know what mine is. So at the end, I'm starting to stop thinking about what and we're learning that with reading that last book, What Power of Now, that, like we make up these false scenarios in our head. It doesn't matter. You've got to do the work every single day. So don't think that, hey, am I being persistent or annoying? Like, I don't know. For me, my message to the audience for today's episode is like, unless somebody actually says like, look, man, you're a bit too much right now in terms of messaging or things like that, then maybe review it. But hustle, man. Go after it. Like, I don't see why not. Like you said too, like your shipper was asking you about what's going on in the market right now. Like, it's down, and then we have I don't know about like 5-10 years ago, now we have the availability of things like Zoom Info and Apollo and Hunter and all that stuff that I can just go plug in some information and get hundreds of leads in literally seconds, right? So it's just when you look at those things, they're going to be on that list. Like, I'm Dan, I can guarantee for a fact that if you were to go into Zoom Info or go to anything Uplead or whatever it is, you search your customer's name, they're going to pop up there, right? So
Yep.
that's what they're starting with, right? Nobody's like going to the website anymore. They're kind of like using this lead gen, and it's a great resource. I think it's one of the best things that you can do, because before you'd have to like call in, and then you got to try to find the right person. Like, sometimes it would take you like a month just to find the right contact. You're going through the dials, you're trying to hit the operator, the gatekeeper, and all that stuff. So you got
Ryan,
to look
I
at that,
can't
add that
tell
too.
you how many times I've, in the beginning of my career, made phone calls, got to somebody, spoke to this person, got all the way down to the wire, and I'm like, okay, I'll pass your information to the person that makes the
Yeah,
decision. And I'm like, dude,
yeah,
I asked you 2 months ago, are you the one to make? And they're like, yeah, 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 it's me, it's me, it's me, it's me,
yeah,
it's me. And oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. That is hilarious. Nerfad brings up Nerf, by the way. What is going on, brother? Long time. He says, listen, I'm here to help you. I want to be a solution, not a burden to you. Yes, we all have mouths to feed, but we're on the same team. So with that being said, when you'd be open for a true discussion about your logistics need, if it's a week from now, 2 weeks from now, that's fine. My goal isn't to know you. I
yeah.
just want to do the right thing. Um, And then he says, for whatever reason, people's walls typically fall when you word things in such a manner. Maybe that day they are currently what they're going through
Yeah.
isn't ideal, and you caught them at
Yep.
the wrong time.
Yep.
I've said that for so many years. It's like you have no idea what's going on with the people that we call. Like we don't
Mhm.
know anything that's going on, and um, it's interesting because you really start think. And for me, it's traffic. And I don't know about you, Ryan, but for me, it's traffic. When I'm in traffic, I start looking around and saying, "There's thousands of people around me. What are they going through?" And what makes that person that is kind of weaving in and out of traffic and trying to get where they're going, I sometimes smile and say, what made them late this morning, right? Because they're late, they're stressed, they get into the office, and all of a sudden that's the person you're calling, right? Like not being aware as to somebody else's environment and what's happening, and not necessarily like knowing what's happening, but being on the page that, hey, anything could be happening to this person that I'm about to call or I'm about to email, and then we forget about it. And I like the way Nerf, maybe without the listen before, because I think that would turn people off. But the I'm here to help, obviously. I like that, Nerf. It's a good one, buddy.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I think for every sales rep out there too, looking to don't get caught up. Like I feel like even thinking about that, what they're kind of going through before even picking up the phone, it's kind of like analysis paralysis, right? I mentioned this a
Oh
million
yeah.
times before. You just gotta honestly just make the freaking calls. You just gotta you gotta do the activity and let the feedback from there kind of show you what you kind of need to do. Because once you kind of get caught up in like, oh, what if they like had a wrong day, or like what if their like
Mhm.
dog died or something like that, at the end of the day, like you're gonna be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't call them,
Yeah.
like, and it's
Well,
just
it's a
like you've made up
procrastination
all,
tool, right?
yeah, you've made up
You
all these
just
false scenarios in your head. Yeah,
Yep.
it is procrastination.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's like anything, right? How many times have we heard, you know, the more you worry about something, it's not going to change the outcome.
Yeah.
Like it's just it is what it is. So, this and I think um knowing that everyone, I'm going to say everyone, I mean, I'm not well versed in other industries besides our industry, but I think sales in general, I think more people are reaching out because business is slow. You would
Yeah.
assume to think that in every industry, right? And you know, I think as we're doing that, knowing or maybe running across a few of our prospects that are saying, you know what, I get 15, 20 calls a day for this same crap. Why
Yeah.
are you, like, how are you different? What are you going to do that's going to make things change for me? I think that embeds itself a little too deep in salespeople's heads. And then
Hmm.
that's where we start that internal conversation with ourselves that we're being annoying. We're pissing somebody off. And again, we go back to things we've said many times. When we wake up in the morning, I don't think we intend to piss people off. Sometimes we do, so be it. But I don't think it's in our intention when we first wake up. So that actually reverts back to not making the amount of calls every day as opposed to hitting it head on. So I love that point that you made, Ryan, because that little conversation in our head can actually destroy all our productivity in a day, and it's so false.
Yeah.
Like it's not accurate. And I often say, as a salesperson, you need to make those calls because then your next customer needs you to call them today.
Yeah.
And I
And
know
what worked
it's
for me, yeah, and I
yeah,
love that because like I feel like we can get carried sorry, we can get lost in our CRM if we're using HubSpot or Salesforce and things like that. And for me, what's really worked like when I first started was just literally like putting all my contacts on a Word document and just print it. Had the phone numbers, had the name, and just go to town, and just like highlight. After I finish one, highlight, go to the next one, highlight, go to the next one, and it was just like that mental note of understanding that my aim, if I've got like 25 to 30 contacts on here, is to connect with 5 people, even if it is the gatekeeper, right? Like make it a way that, hey, even if it's not the logistics manager, I'm going to talk to somebody in sales. Sales always picks up. Like if you have a for-profit company and your sales doesn't pick up the phone, then you guys are kind of screwed because like that
Yeah,
means
you got
what are
some
those
issues.
guys doing? Yeah, you definitely got some issues, right? So
Yeah.
being able to connect with people, and I think when you get out that mindset too, right? Like you look at the persistence versus annoyance, right? Are you that person or who is always selling your services as soon as they pick up the phone? Nerf had a great thing here. He didn't sell anything. He didn't even introduce himself in that message, and I love that so much. You're getting to that human to human. Like he made it. I'm reading it here. He says, look, the only time he talked about logistics was have a true discussion about your logistics needs. He didn't say I'm Nerf with this company. We have a million trucks. We do this. That can be considered annoying, right? He's
Yeah.
connecting on a human to human level, and I think that's what we all. That's the aim of every single interaction we should have.
Hmm. And also, there's I believe, anyways, there's a process that a lot of salespeople follow, and it's sell, 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 sell. So, for example, prospect says, "Hey, listen, I focus on relationships. The next call you're trying to sell something." Instead of listening to the prospect about their process, and I don't know if you've ever done it, Ryan, but I know early in my career I did it, where no matter what the reason was that the person bought, I would still follow the same pattern of sell, sell, sell. Hey, can I get a lane this week to test? And he's like, Dan, I told you, like, I'm totally set. I believe in relationships. I'm not going to replace somebody for a minor issue. If they massively screw up, I might try you. Otherwise, you're next in line for a new lane when it pops up. And
Yeah.
then like a week later, hey, can you test me out on a lane? Because you know what? It's better that you test me out now before you decide to use me. Because when you decide to use me, what if I fail? Right. And this is my whole philosophy. And I had so many people say, listen,
I thought you keep your
what did
hands
I say
down.
to you last time? You're not listening to me. And I think it just happened again, didn't it? I saw
Yeah,
something out of
keep
the
your. You
corner of
said
my
your
eye.
hands. See, you can't. You
Buddy,
can.
I'm
You can.
trying.
Help it, man. You're the whole thing. No, but I love that you said that, Dan. I've never, just to answer your question, I've never done that in terms of asking. I think it's how you look at your prospects, and I know we're only talking about new customers, so maybe switch the focus to like existing customers. So it's like you've got this one lane and you want to do more and things like that. You're like, hey, we've had we've had 20 loads this week. We've been perfect. What else can we get, right? And
Yeah.
I think that it's a genuine question to ask, right? As long as you can manage it, you take care of what you have right now, and then you kind of continue to ask for more. And I don't think
Yeah.
that that annoyance you can. And to be honest, you can be really annoying after having the customer, and they'll be like, I don't really want to work with these guys,
Yeah.
right? If because on
100%.
the
Yeah.
other side, because you've moved from prospect to like unknown to supplier, right? So, and we've had like shipping managers on here saying that it's costs a lot to change providers. So they have to make the right decisions, not only for like themselves and their team, like their bosses and their customers'
Mhm.
customer, right? So it
Mhm.
takes a lot. And when we kind of understand that working of truly getting a customer, I think you kind of thread that line a little bit. But for everybody's out there, especially if you're brand new, like don't even worry about like, hey, just make sure that you're persistent enough, and persistence enough means that you're reaching out, you're sticking to your follow-ups, you're doing the things, you're making the deposits with them, and always kind of work with them.
Here's my belief when it comes to follow ups. If I'm always sharing with you when I'm going to follow up, um, I believe that's the route to go. So, for example, in everything I do, I'm like, I'll follow up with you in 2 days.
Mm,
And I actually tell the prospect, I'll follow up with you in 2 days. I'll follow up on this date. I'll follow up on this date. And make sure you do if you're going to follow that scenario, because I believe, anyways, that they put it in their calendar, or they just look at your past email and say, okay, you're not even following up when you say you're going to follow up. How in the hell am I even going to trust you when we do business? Like, you're trying to get my business now. So you should be a little bit more attentive to my needs than because most people, when they get the business, it's like, ops starts taking care of them. The salesperson maybe steps back to every 2 days, to every 4 days to call them. Maybe it's once a week, and then all that. And I've often found that for me was the differentiating factor between persistence and annoyance. Is when I said, "Hey, I'll follow up in 2 days." I've gotten people come back saying, "Hey, do me a favor, call me in a week.
yeah,
Don't
I've seen
call me
that.
in
Yeah.
2 days. Like, call me in a week." And it's more along the lines of, hey, Ryan, we talked today. Hey, you know what? I'll give you a call in 2 days. And you're kind of in your head, you're going, no, I don't need to speak to you in 2 days, Dan. Call me next week.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And now if I call back in 2 days, now I'm an annoyance. But if I call back in a week, like you said, I'm persistent. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I think like for me, and I think you're the same way too. I usually don't do that. I always have everything scheduled on like on a calendar link, right? So I always give the customer an option. So everything that I have with my customers, they're gonna go ahead and they're gonna book that in,
Oh,
right?
I'm
So they're
talking
gonna be
about
like, hey, yeah.
prospecting, not
Well,
customer.
even prospecting too. Even prospecting, like I think like let's say I got to send rates or something like that. I always get something. I always get something on the calendar. I think I was telling you this morning as well that if it's not on my calendar, I'm not going to remember to do it.
Yes.
Even if I write it down on a piece of paper or something like that. So I think for everybody, if you're talking to prospects and you actually get them on the phone and let's call it spade a spade, they're going to talk about their business, they're going to talk about lanes, they're going to ask you if your asset or like there's these very common questions that they're going to ask you. So usually the next conversation after having that first connected call is going to be you're going to come back with rates. Right, that's just usually what kind of happens if you're going to get the opportunity. So I always believe like having that as a conversation rather than having an email, because I find like with emails they can kind of like tell you to like they're going to look at the rates and be like, okay, this guy is either good or he's bad. But then when you have that conversation with them, be like, okay, well, what is your current supplier like doing right now? Like you're able to
Yeah.
have more of an engaged conversation than sending an email from there. So yeah, like I really think with everybody, as Damon kind of mentions, get sales training. Not all sales training is exact. Like you mentioned earlier in this conversation with starting this episode, some people say use the Grant Cardone, go 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 go. I don't like Grant Cardone. I can't stand the guy, but I'll watch like Alex Ramosi or something like that, and I take that and I can learn with that. And if he says follow up every 3 days or follow up every single day or do something like that, then these are things we can kind of do. So for any new rep out there, make sure you build a foundation. Forget about thinking about your persistent annoying. Do the work first. Like go ahead, make the calls, make the emails, and then A/B test it. As Dan, we always talk about, test it after 90 days. Like if you've not made any sales or gotten a quote within like 90 days, then something's wrong, right? Like your
Yeah.
messaging and your phone calls and full transparency is probably because
Something's
you're
amiss.
yeah, something's definitely a huge
Mhm.
miss. So
So
I
you
just
got a couple of levels that you're talking about there, Ryan. One is the non-connecting level, so before you've connected, right? And that's where persistence versus annoyance can get in the way. I think once you connect and there's a mutual beneficial reason to move forward, then everything's scheduled, right? Then it's in your
yeah,
calendar. But like you might have in your calendar 2 hours of prospecting today,
yeah,
right? And in that, or maybe an hour or whatever, an hour in the morning, like however you, excuse me, split up your calendar. And I think once there's a reason to connect again, that's when the relationship goes from baseline up a level.
yeah.
And then as you maybe get rates or whatever in the door, and then you get business, that now you're moving to another level, and you just keep kind of scaling, walking up that customer value ladder, right? Um, I would hope that every salesperson, once you make contact, before you end your call, you decide when the next call will be. And even if if I do this, will you do that? Or it's a stacking of strategies. Okay, so if I get you rates by today at noon, when will you have a chance to look at them? Well, I'll look at them Tuesday by noon. Okay, so then you want to get on a call on Wednesday. Oh, no, let's not do Wednesday because I got meetings. Let's do Thursday, right? And after you actually make a connection, then that's the way your entire business should move forward with scheduling on.
Yeah.
And at that point, I don't think we get annoying because it's a mutual agreement
Yeah,
to
you've already
say,
gotten that already out of the
yeah,
door too. And
yeah,
I,
but
I
also understanding that things change. Now,
yeah,
you being the salesperson, things might not change as much as your prospect. And I know there's been times, and maybe we'll make this for another show, but it's like your prospect doesn't show up to the meeting, or the meeting gets canceled last minute, and we start creating fictitious reasons why in our head instead of answering. But I think that could be a whole other hour
yeah,
conversation
yeah,
right
yeah.
there.
We got about
So
hop on.
in closing here, Ryan, persistence versus annoyance. Give me two things that you would say to anybody watching that's saying to themselves, I'm not sure if I'm being persistent or if I'm being annoying.
First thing, look at the numbers. Numbers don't lie. Data doesn't lie. Men lie, women lie. So if you're thinking like, hey, I'm banging out X amount of calls, or I'm really working in these 2 hour blocks, but you're not, that's the first thing you got to look at the numbers. And then once you've looked at the numbers, look at the conversations you're having, right? Don't I think with, especially with email, we can interpret it so much. Like, oh, is this person being sarcastic, or this like do not interpret it. Take it for what it is, right? So I think with one of the most important things is read between the lines, look at those conversations, and like I said, test. I would even get out of the mindset, persons for annoyance, forget that. Just continue to figure out what works for you and see what is working. Don't worry about the 99 people who didn't pick up. Focus on the one who did pick up and how you can move them through the customer ladder.